Well, hello to all the viewers, all of you who are watching. I've been telling you that we're going to have Mr. Howard Bloom, and here he is. I have left the link to buy his book, and I know a few of you have bought it. So, after this interview that Mr. Bloom has kindly agreed to grant me, you're going to buy it even more. I've been following this and it's unbelievable. Mr. Howard Bloom is a best-selling author, and I believe that this story covering these murders, you're nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. Is that correct? Pulitzer Award.
Yes, I was. Yes, for the reporting I did for the magazine pieces leading up to this book. Yes.
Oh, wow. That is unbelievable. Can you tell me a little bit how you got involved with this particular story? What the thought
Sure.
process was?
I'm a reporter by training. I worked at the New York Times for over a decade. Then I started writing for Vanity Fair for a long time, and I've done 16 books in the course of this. 2 Thanksgivings ago, we were sitting around the table and people started talking about these murders in Idaho, and I hadn't paid really too much attention to it at all. And the more I listened, the more perplexing the mystery became. I thought, well, this is something I'd like to look into. So I sort of put on my reporter's trench coat and went out to Idaho before there was any suspect in the case and started going around knocking on doors. And I became addicted to trying to find out what was happening in this case, and then decided to write a book that would tell this story as a sustained narrative filled with suspense and drama and also the truth.
Wow. Was it a hard thing for you to gather information?
Going out on any story is always difficult. It was particularly difficult in this story because of the judicial gag order. This gag order, given by the judge of the case in Idaho, prevented people with specific knowledge of the case, the law enforcement authorities, the lawyers, to talk to anyone about the case. And the families were also limited about what they could say. So I had one thing going for me. I went out to Idaho before this gag order was in effect. And so I had established relationships with people. I was able to use these relationships to try to get more information as the case went on, despite the gag order. I also did something that the FBI did. The FBI built their case with something called investigative genetic genealogy. That is, they try to use the DNA samples to build a family tree going to the outer branches until they eventually work their way to the suspect. I worked back from that. I followed the suspect and tried to get relatives who were not restrained by this or constricted by this gag order. And I spent time speaking with them. And they allowed me to get inside often the minds of the very people involved in this story because of things they had shared with relatives. I also was able to speak to some of the attorneys who had an involvement in the case who were not constrained by the gag order. And this allowed me to sort of flesh out the drama so I could make readers feel as if they were right there when things were happening.
That now that's the way to go for sure. I was wondering, does it you've established this relationship. So this was, from what I read, I'm not going to give away the book, guys, because you have to buy it. You spent quite a few months building these relationships with these people, especially with very close family relatives, or that must have taken quite a while for you to achieve that.
It was difficult to do in the sense that, people are always reluctant to talk. But one thing I've learned as a reporter, if you keep on pressing on them, is sometimes you make yourself a bit annoying, but eventually people will want to share what they know. And this was particularly vital, I think, in this case, because of the judicial gag order. There was such a vacuum of what really was happening. The facts weren't there, and instead the vacuum was being filled with, fatuous statements, mistruths, and also deliberate vicious lies that filled the internet for people for their own grudges, wanting to put suspicion on other people. And so I felt almost a reportorial responsibility to get to the bottom of things. And I spent time in Idaho another part of the story takes place in Pennsylvania. I was there for a while in Washington State, and over the past nearly 2 years, I went back and forth from my home back east to those places.
This is really interesting because I usually talk in my channel about how the mainstream media no longer. I actually was talking to a person who owns a newspaper. It's called the Steeple Time. And he's like, oh, the press doesn't have, or reporters don't have the budget to follow up stories to do what you did. Howard, is basically proper journalism. You went to the story, you sought out sources instead of just sitting on a computer and looking to see what everybody else was writing. You literally did proper journalism, which is
It's also, I've got to say, it's a lot of fun to go off to someplace pretty exotic, to go around trying to get people to talk, to see things with your own eyes where the events really happened, to try to get people who are close to the principals involved to speak. You go to take people to a lot of restaurants, a lot of bars, a lot of coffee shops, trying to get the story out. And, it's a challenge, and then it's also exciting. And then once you have the facts, you have to figure out a way to tell this story in a dramatic narrative. And I think I stumbled on something. I base the whole story largely around a car trip that the suspect takes with his father weeks after the murder across America, and what happens on that car trip. It's sort of, my version of the Odyssey, and I'm trying to tell this drama. The Odyssey took 10 years for Odysseus to get home. This takes 5 days, but it has a lot of import.
That's awesome. I wanted to ask you, what did you find? You know how these murderers are, that they think they're unique in what they do, that they're not like the other murderers or people like that. Did you find this to be the case? Because from this gentleman Koberger, he's kind of like he feels himself superior, like us. I think he thinks of himself as a wounded genius, who didn't get the breaks that he deserved. Do you think he feels it's different than the other people?
Well, first we should, make clear that, Koberger is just the suspect. He's going to stand trial a year from now.
Yeah,
at the earliest. At the earliest, and he's been accused of the crime, but he certainly has not been convicted of anything. But he also is a graduate student in criminology, and he wanted to become a forensic psychologist. He wanted to be able to connect the dots so he could figure out what was in the minds of criminals. And I think, and this is my theorizing, I believe that he is guilty. I believe that he started out in his rage. He was driven by both mania and also a desire to commit the perfect crime. I think, as we can see along the way, he thought he would be smarter than everyone else involved, that he would be able to avoid detection, and he stumbles time after time after time, and that allows him to be eventually caught by the authorities.
And I just forgot to mention it because I take it for granted that everybody knows what we're talking about. We're talking about Bryan Koberger, a guy who stabbed 4 students at Idaho University. Is that correct, sir? And
allegedly stabbed 4 young students.
Allegedly, for the purposes of this interview, guys, instead of saying allegedly all the time, we're going to assume, of course, he's innocent until proven guilty. But allegedly, he stabbed 4 students from the Idaho University. While being a professor, or he was already fired, from what I understand, but he didn't know it, right?
Well, he was a teaching assistant in the graduate school of Washington State University, which was 10 miles away. While he was a teaching student, he had just come out to the university to begin his studies there. He immediately gets in trouble with the authorities. The students he's teaching don't like his attitude. They feel he's too strict. The professor in charge, Professor John Snyder, goes to talk with him to see if they can smooth the situation. Instead, Koberger blows up. He won't brook or endure any kind of criticism. This leads the professor and his department to have a discussion with the department heads, and they sort of put him under watch. Koberger his whole job there is in jeopardy. And this job is just not a job. You have to look at this man. He's 28 years old, and he has, to his credit, been able to reinvent his life. He grew up in a hard-scrabble town in the Poconos in Pennsylvania. He went to a high school where his father was the janitor. He became a heroin addict, and yet is able then to turn his life around. He gets into a junior college, a low-ranking college, and in the process, he loses 125 pounds. He turns his body into a fortress. He works out. He manages to get into a very good university to graduate, DeSalle University, and then he gets into a first-rate graduate school. So it looks like an academic success story, a man who's turned his life completely around. But once he gets into this new situation, he still, to his dismay, finds out he can't fit in. He can't become the sort of man he wants to be. He's having problems with the female students. There are reports from his classrooms that he's misogynistic. And eventually, he gets in conflict with the university. The university decides that they don't want him to return for the next semester. They're not going to pay his tuition. And without that money, he can't go get his graduate degree. Without getting his graduate degree, then he's nothing but what he was before, this young man growing up in this hard-scrabble town in the Poconos. And he had larger ambitions. And now this whole world, which he's carefully constructed for himself, is about to turn down. That's an existential shock to anyone's system. It's a particularly large shock to someone whose life has been lived on tenterhooks, whose existence has always been so precarious, who's had so many psychological problems in addition to his heroin addiction. And this, I think the prosecution will argue, is the reason why, one of the reasons why he was pushed towards rape and then murder.
Do you think he snapped? That he just snapped? Do you think that he snapped?
I think that was part of the reason why he snapped. I think, one of the things I discuss in the book is he wound up killing 4 students. I don't think that was his initial intent.
I read that.
I think he went that night to kill just one person. And let's maybe it might be worthwhile to discuss what went on that night, if you will.
Yeah, because I'm surprised, if you can clarify with me, because I watched on Megyn Kelly, right? And then, oh my God, you're drinking coffee and I'm drinking rum. That's not good. But I watched you on Megyn Kelly, and there was something very interesting because you basically say that the other 3 were pretty much collateral damage. He just said in for a pound, in for a penny, in for a pound once he started. And is that pretty much it?
Well, it's what happened was, I think on that night, he circles the house 3 times. It's been written about before that this was surveillance. He was sort of checking out the house. I don't think that's the case. I think what he was doing was trying to gather the nerve to cross over this mental line between the idea in his mind that he had to rid the world of these people who were tormenting him, or he could go back to the life he was living. And each time he tried to go there to turn off the ignition key to his car and to go down from the hilltop into the house, he couldn't do it. He wasn't there yet. The reality was too overwhelming, and he tries to escape. The demons that are stuck inside him are overpowering, and he can't escape. He's pulled back by a magnet, as if it were. And he finally gets his car on the top of the hill, and he finds the strength of Hercules, to turn off his car and to stop, and then to descend down this icy hill with his knife in his hand. And as he does this, his mind is now committed to kill. But he only is committed to killing, at this point, one person, one individual, I believe. He enters the house through a side door, the kitchen that's on the house's 2nd floor. The door slides open. He makes his way down the 2nd floor hallway. There are 2 bedrooms on either side. Each of them has students in them. He doesn't stop to go to either of them. Instead, he goes up the narrow staircase to the third floor and enters the one bedroom of his target, Maddie Mogan. As soon as he enters that room, he's surprised to find that she has a girlfriend who's just come in for the weekend. She lives in the house, Kaylee Goncalves, but she's been away up north in Coeur d'Alene, where she's been doing an internship. She's about to graduate. She came down to show her friends her new car that she had gotten, and I think he's surprised to see her. And now he gets rid or eliminates, he slashes viciously Maddie, and then Kaylee tries to fight back. She tries to get away from him. She's pushed up against the wall, the end of the room behind the bed, and he kills her too. She's collateral damage. He then goes down the stairs from the third floor to the second floor. When he goes down the stairs, coming out of one bedroom, is Ethan Chapin, who's 6'4", an athlete, a genial, wonderful young man. And he confronts Kohberger, and Kohberger, with one slash, goes for his neck, and Ethan just succumbs, falls down. And then Ethan's girlfriend, whose room it is, Xana Kernodle, she screams out something, and he says, "It's okay, I won't hurt you." The killer says, "It's okay, I won't hurt you." And of course, he kills her. There's one of the stab wounds is right through her palm. Imagine her holding it up, and the knife goes right through. He completes these 4 murders. 3 of them were never in his mind, unintended. He walks out, and here's where things get particularly perplexing and weird. There's a roommate also on the second floor, Dylan Mortensen. She's come out, she's heard noise before. She now comes out of her room. She sees this man dressed in black. He's wearing a black mask up to his nose. And she stares at him, and she's locked in, as she's told the police, in a state of frozen fright. At this point, I believe the killer is locked in his own state of mania, his own anger, his own armory of hate protects him, and he is he's oblivious to her presence. She is unable to speak, to cry, even in fear or pain or horror. And I also believe if she had said one word, if she had uttered a sound, if she had cried for help, if she had moved towards him, if she had done anything, that would have pulled the killer from the state that he was locked in, and her silence literally saved her life. The killer leaves, she goes back to her bedroom, and here's another perplexing element. This young woman does not report anything for another 8 hours. 8 hours.
I was blown away by that, Howard. I don't understand that. I really don't.
It's impossible to understand. It's not a rational response, but this was not a rational evening. The events defy reason. I believe it was too overwhelming for her to process. And I believe that she just was locked in this state, trying to make believe as if it were almost a dream. And then even add more perplexity to this event, when she finally decides to notify someone, the next day, 8 hours later, she doesn't call the police. She calls one of the friends from a nearby fraternity. They come over, they take her cell phone, and they finally, 8 hours later, call the police. It's an event. That's why I think it's attracted so much attention, so much interest. It's filled with all sorts of large questions that are very difficult to answer, because you need people are looking for rational answers to events that defy reason or logic.
Yeah, because the first thing you do, I mean, I understand that she froze when she saw the guy. I can understand the panic and fear, but once the guy leaves, I believe that 99.99% of us, the first thing we would do is like, I'm going to call the cops. I mean, this guy was in this house, and out of fear, I would call the cops, because I don't know if this person is around or anything like that. So to me, that That is very shady, to say the least. I'm sorry. I know she probably froze, but you know what I mean? Maybe I'm
You
thinking.
know, I mean, your reaction is very valid, and it's going to have large consequences in the courtroom, because if she's going to be the witness who is going to testify against Koberger, if the prosecution is going to bring her up, her testimony is very easily impugned. There are a lot of questions, the ones you're asking, that the defense will want her to answer, and I think her statements will be weighed with a great deal of skepticism by the jury.
And also, she didn't really see his face.
No, she had a good physical description. She talks about his bushy eyebrows and that he was sort of athletic build and he was maybe 5'10". The police have stated that Koberger has bushy eyebrows, but a lot of people have bushy eyebrows. I don't think that's much of an identification,
Yeah, it's not.
especially if you're in a courtroom where the judge has bushy eyebrows.
Also, they can easily make the case that he's not a killer because he let her live. As if he were a killer, like, if he's killing everything that moves, that kind of speaks in his favor, like saying, wait a minute, if
Well,
he was there, I mean, there's so many things,
I don't
that
know
are
how you can find too much in a person's favor if he just killed 4 young people.
no, absolutely not. I understand that, but
I mean, I think you can make a better case that he was just locked in a very tight, manic state.
and do you think, what do you think? I mean, we know that he left the house and he went back. I mean, and he really thought, or allegedly, if he did it, that he got away with it, right?
Yes. What's also interesting, you say he left the house. He didn't leave a trail of blood. There's no blood anywhere. To this day, the prosecution or the defense have not found the murder weapon. They have not found that knife. The police believe, and I've found this out, it's sort of revealed in my book, that he had bought a work suit, a workman's outfit, earlier that month, and he had worn that, and that perhaps was covered with all the blood, but they have not been able to find that. When the suspect leaves the house, he goes on this long circuitous drive all around the area for over 2 hours. And perhaps during that time, he got rid of the workman's suit and the knife. But to this day, the authorities have not found either of them. And that also is going to make his getting convicted more difficult.
Yeah, I guess he was good at studying, because that's exactly pretty much what he was studying about the criminal thing. So he would know a thing or two, right?
But he did leave something behind. And this eventually left him on the third floor bedroom where he made the first killing of Maddie. He left the knife sheath that he brought his knife in, this K-bar 7-inch bladed hunter's knife. And he left that behind, probably by accident, probably because he was surprised by the presence of another young woman in that room. He leaves a knife sheath on there, and the police are able to find a tiny speck of DNA on the button on the knife sheath. And they're able to send this bit of DNA to a lab in Houston, Texas, which does some work on it, and they're able to extract the DNA, but they can't, there's nothing in the criminal databases for anyone belonging to this DNA. So they send it to the FBI laboratory in Quantico, Virginia, and the FBI is able to go through it, and they're able to build out a family tree. You know how the Bible begins in Genesis? Begat, begat, begat. Well, that's what they start doing with this DNA. It's all the people who can be connected to this DNA, who begat whom. And it leads finally on the furthest branch of this family tree to Bryan Koberger, who just happens to be living 10 miles from the murders. He just happens to have a white Hyundai Elantra, which is the sort of car they've been looking for. And they begin to make him a person of interest.
And just to be clear, this gentleman Koberger had never killed before. There's no history of him being violent or any accusations against him or anything like that. So he has a clean record, right?
Yes, he was his father, when he was a teenager, reported him when he was a heroin addict for stealing his sister's phone. But that was really expunged from his record. So Koberger had led, besides his psychological problems, a rather admirable life. And as I said, he was an academic success story. He makes his way from a junior college to a graduate program, get a doctorate in one of the best universities in the nation.
It's such a waste, don't you think? Because he fought so hard for everything to just be, I mean, if he gets convicted, to lose it like that, you know. I wonder if he has Asperger's or something like that, because I don't know, you know, because this is so weird. I wonder if he has anything
But
residuals left from the heroin use, if it affected him in any way.
he has written about on chats as a teenager, he suffered from something called visual snow. Visual snow is a psychological condition where you see the world literally as if it was a fuzzy TV screen, as if it was you couldn't get the pattern into focus, as if snow were falling. And he writes on this website for people suffering from this disease that he sees himself as totally worthless, as a lump of meat. I have no value. He's almost like an existential character in a book by Camus, that where the whole world is around him is meaningless. And because he's not bound by any means or rules or regulations, he can do whatever he wants with impunity. He has no guilt.
Wow. So he's pretty much a psychopath.
Well, I'm not a psychologist, but he certainly has severe psychological problems. I talk another time when he first gets to the graduate school. He's invited to a pool party in Moscow, Idaho, where the kids go to school, and he goes to this pool party. And he's sitting there, and I think he's feeling pretty good about himself. He's lost 125 pounds. He's in good shape. He's sitting by the pool, and he sees two young women, and witnesses say he goes up to them, asks each of them for their phone numbers, and he gets it. I mean, they're willing to interact with him. He gets the phone numbers. He immediately leaves the party, and the women, when I spoke with them, he never calls them. However, a couple of weeks later, they begin to get hang-up calls. And it was only till after the arrest that they put what they believe the possibility together that maybe this was him calling them, and he just didn't have the nerve to really speak to them. He couldn't go to the next level and consummate even a date or a friendship.
That is really, really sad. Now, in your book, and you just mentioned here too, that car drive with his father, that was very like a changing moment. And I mean, I don't know if but from what I gather, from what I read, it sounded like his father was afraid of him. I mean, can you talk a little bit about that car drive?
Sure. It's Christmas break is coming up, and Koberger is going to school at Washington State, which is at one end of the country in the west of America, and he lives at the other end in the east in Pennsylvania. So his father, who's 68 years old, comes back to make this trip with his son. I think he felt that his son might be in a precarious state. He wanted to check out how his son was, and out of paternal duty, make this trip with his son. As soon as the father gets off the airplane and meets the son, he can tell, is in one of his agitated states. The son is confrontational. The son is looking to pick a fight. The father does what he always does in these situations. He backs off. He says, all right, let the boy be, in effect. And yet, the father also, thoughts are becoming clear in his mind. I mean, there's his son living 10 miles away from the murder. He's sitting now in the car with his son. It's the same white type of car that the FBI has announced they're looking for. And he knows his son has these problems. So they begin this trip. The father has a route that he's already mapped out. Koberger wants to take a different route. Perhaps he was trying to lose any authorities that were following him. As they go on this route, the father is listening and listening. The son is talking about the problems he's having at school, how they're trying to kick him out of the graduate program, but he's going to fight it and he'll win. The father is nodding, passively. not wanting to enrage his son. And yet at the same time, it's as if the father is following footsteps in his mind. He's going one footstep after another, till he reaches the destination where in his mind, it's becoming clear that, oh my gosh, could it be? Could my son have been involved in these 4 murders? And as all these thoughts are coming together in his mind, 2 things happen. The first, they're stopped by the police. And the father is beginning to wonder, is this going to be, they're coming for my son's arrest? Is this everything I fear is finally happening? But the police let him go. It's just a traffic violation. He was driving too close to a truck. And then 9 minutes later, this happens again. And now the father is thinking, well, maybe I was right the first time. Life is repeating itself. But again, it's another traffic violation. And as this journey continues across America, the father, as they get closer and closer to their destination, is becoming closer and closer to the realization that, oh my gosh, my son might very well be a murderer. And the father, of course, can't deal with this. What father could?
This is actually something I can just imagine. And that must have been because the parents are from humble beginnings. As you said, he was a janitor. I mean, what do you think? When do you think that the penny dropped for him for reals? And that he said, okay, this is it. And I mean, did he try to help him or,
Well,
I mean, horrible.
when they get back for the Christmas holidays to their home in Pennsylvania, other family members are there. As I tell in my book, the sister is there, and she's a family psychologist, and she sees her brother meticulously cleaning his white Hyundai Elantra, and she, of course, knows the authorities are looking for a Hyundai Elantra. And then she also sees him, oddly, taking his own personal garbage, putting it into plastic Ziploc bags, and not depositing them into their own garbage, but going down the hill to a neighbor's garbage pail and putting the garbage in there. And she realizes he's trying to hide his DNA or whatever, being associated with something. And she realizes, oh my gosh, my brother might be involved in this. So she goes to confront the father. And she says, in effect, Dad, we have a real problem with Bryan. I think he could be involved in the events that happened in Idaho. His father listens, and all he can do is just walk out of the room. And then, like a Greek drama, it's interesting how Bryan is finally caught as a suspect. They find DNA. When the police come, they do a raid. It's called in the police circles the Great Trash Can Robbery. They come at 2 a.m. They rob the trash from the Koberger garbage pail, and they take it to be analyzed. And they want to see if it matches the DNA on the button of the knife sheath that they have. And it doesn't. It doesn't match at all. But it does match. They finally work out to the father of the person whose DNA was on the knife sheath button. So the father, in effect, leads the path to the son, no matter how much he was trying to get away with it. Like a Greek drama, the father's involvement is inevitable. It's as if it were fated. I mean, that's part of the story I tell in When the Night Comes Falling. It's the drama that builds throughout the entire book, this father-son dynamic.
It's like a Greek story, Greek tragedy. And why do you think that he wanted to harm that particular victim? What did she do to him?
Yeah, you're asking, I think, an important question, but it's also too rational a question to understand what happened. I think, the prosecution and the defense agree that he never spoke any words that they can find to any of the victims, that he never even followed them on any social media accounts. There is, however, a vegetarian vegan restaurant in this little town in Idaho where he would go to. because he was vegan, and Maddie Mogan was a waitress there. I believe he encountered her there, and something about her ebullience, her vivaciousness, her blonde beauty, caught his eye. He might never have spoken a word to her, but he became fixated with her, and this fixation uh, led to his crime. Did he love her image so much and hate himself so much for being cut off from that involvement in the world she was in? Did he hate her? Did he find her as a constant rebuke to the sort of outsider's life he was leading? I can't answer that for sure, but I think something about her in a man whose life was really measured out in obsessions got him going. I mean, we talk about his obsessive personality, a heroin addict, then losing 125 pounds, then turning his whole academic world around once he made up his mind to go from a junior college to a world-class graduate school. He becomes obsessed with things.
And I mean, so far that if I understand it correctly, they haven't found a murder weapon. They don't have a witness that saw him kill anybody. The only thing they have is that little speck of thing they found in the sheet that they found up there, and some DNA from the father back at home, and the fact that the Ford Elantra was seen around the series, and the roommate who saw a man with bushy eyebrows around 5'10", who wearing a mask, who got out of the room. Is that pretty much what's wrapped up?
Well, they have a little more than that. They have, after he was arrested, they took a cheek swab, a DNA, and according to reports, that matches also the knife sheath now. So it's not just the father led to the arrest, but now once they made the arrest, they were able to get more DNA, and that ties to Kohberger. They also have surveillance videos of a white Hyundai in the area, and the surveillance videos, the defense will point out, never show a license plate, and they never give a clear picture of who's behind the wheel, who's at the steering wheel. And the defense has come up with an alibi. Here's where they say it's taken them nearly 2 years. Here's how they explain what Bryan Kohberger was doing that night when the murders occurred. He'd gone off at 4 a.m. to a rural park in Washington State and was out there on this cloudy night in frigid temperatures, was close to zero temperature, and he was stargazing for these 2 hours, and there were no witnesses around. This is what they've come up with after 2 years of building the case. Now, if I were innocent, if I believed in someone's innocence, I'd be shouting it from the rooftops. I wouldn't want the suspect or my client to stay in jail for 2 years. And I think what the defense is really trying to do is have a strategy of delay. Let's keep on getting this trial delayed so we don't have to deal with the facts. There's an old lawyer's wisdom. You know, if you have the facts, you pound them. If you don't have the facts, you pound the table. And what the defense has been doing is pounding the table for the past 2 years with a rat-a-tat-tat of motions, trying to delay. And now finally the trial has been scheduled until June 2nd, 2025. Later in August 29th, there's going to be a hearing on a change of venue to move the trial from Moscow, Idaho, to somewhere else in the state. If this happens, if the court grants this change of venue, that could delay the trial even longer than the June 2nd of 2025. So the trial is at least a year in the future. I think it could arguably be 2 years.
But then he's still in jail through all this.
He's still in jail, but here's the other thing. All the families of the victims, the entire town, they need some sort of closure. They need to get this resolved. They are also victims in this tragedy, and there really are no survivors. It's a story with just victims. That's the story I tell, and as we show it, When the Night Comes Falling, a requiem for the Idaho student murders. And the subtitle, a requiem, for the Idaho student murders is carefully chosen because I want this to be a loving remembrance of the four young people who died. They shouldn't get lost in the story. They had so much ahead of them. One of the young women, Zaina, went to her high school graduation with her college graduation cap, and underneath it she had written, "For the lives I will change. For the lives I will change." And the real large tragedy of this whole story is that none of these young children will ever get the opportunity to affect other lives, to live the lives they would have led. That's the horror of this.
Yeah, also, I read somewhere that when you kill somebody, you kill lots of people because you kill the possibility of them having a family. So you've killed, other people indirectly because these women would have grown to have children, like, so you killed a lot of that, which is pretty awful. But I want to thank you, Howard, for being here. And hopefully, if you can have time for a follow up, because I'm sure everybody's going to want to read this, please go buy the book. It's When the Night Comes Falling, A Requiem for the Idaho Student Murders. It is an amazing book. I could put it down. And I am so thankful that you came and talked about it. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Pleasure to speak with you. Bye bye.